Recording has started and we can also start. So a fair warning for everyone. Well, most of you should be familiar with that. We do record this meeting and it will be published afterwards on YouTube. So if that bothers you, then I would advise you to leave and watch the recording itself. But with that said, let me proceed then with a short intro about what we're doing today. And for today, we also have a speaker for us, kind of telling about ASP.NET, sorry, not ASP.NET, but EntityFramework Core and how to work with database. And yeah, that's today's topic. So next week, we will have testing and dependency injection lined up. So I will be doing the presentation for that event. And after that, we'll have some more time in between the sessions as we have a meetup on kind of the week in between. But for today, let's move on to the topic. Once we are done with the live coding part, we'll kind of take a look at the task for the next event for May 13th. So the homework that you can go through materials and try to do on your own before we touch on it on next session. But yeah, I think I'm ready to hand the screen off to Anton.
Okay, thanks. So while I'm sharing actually my screen here, I will need to share this screen apparently. So let me actually introduce myself at least a bit. My name is Anton Boyko. I'm based in Kyiv, Ukraine, and I worked with Microsoft technologies for a long time, almost for my entire career. And yeah, I do believe that my experience with different Microsoft technologies are now counting more than 15 years. Anyway, in addition to that, I'm a Microsoft Azure MVP and also Microsoft Regional Director, but I'm here with you today to talk to you about neither of those. I'm here with you today to talk about the Entity Framework Core. So what we will have here, we will have basically a set of few demos, basically, if I'm not mistaken, 4 different labs that I will do right here in front of you. In addition to that, I also have some extra materials and I also have an experience from basically all the different projects I was using the Entity Framework Core. So yeah, feel free to ask any questions you'd like to discuss. I would like to have that, like more as a discussion rather than me doing the talking and you do the listening. So what we will basically start with. So if I'm not mistaken, that what you should basically end up as a part of your last session. So now we will start working with the entity framework. Let me just switch for the proper file with the notes here. I need to find it. Wait a sec. So what we will do as a part of our first, let's say, lab, what we will do, we will create a simple app which we will use to generate some test data to populate our database. Because in general, I also found that were useful on my project as well, So let's actually start working on those. So what I will do in this tools folder, I will just create a new project. Yep. And that will be the regular console application. Let me just find the proper template. Okay, so that will be the console application here. Next. And I don't know, I will name it something like we have in our example. I will use test data generator. Next. And yeah, for now, I know that the latest version of the .NET Core is version 5. Okay, the .NET 5 has not anymore has this core even extension there, but again, on this machine, I will use .NET Core 3.1, which will be more than enough to do the same demo. So if you're using .NET 5, then you will be able to do basically the same stuff that I'm doing here in front of you. Okay, so now I do have my application for a test data generator, and what I would like to also do here, I would like to put some code, but before I will put some code into that app, I also have an example. I mean, like I also have a test file with the list of names that we will use to generate our data. So first of all, I will create that file here. I will, yeah, basically you can just copy and paste it from some other place, but what I will do, I will just create a general text file and I will name it names.txt. And here I have some content, basically a list of random names, and we will use those names basically to, kind of create some generalized test data for our application. Okay, so how we will actually do that, how our script will work in the first place, how our algorithm will work in the first place. So we will basically grab those names from that file. We will use that as an input. Then we will also on a fly, we will generate some emails, we will generate some extra data that we will use for our person table. And after that, we will save all the results in the plain old SQL script. So at the end of the day, we will have a SQL script and we will be able to use that SQL script either from your SQL Management Studio or even as a part of some bigger automation. Because for non-production environments, what you can do, you can automate basically the rollout of that script. So let's get started. What I will do, I will just basically copy and paste some code from the example that I have, and then I will explain what that code is actually doing, just to save us a bit more time. Mm-hmm. And I also need to have this part here. And one more line I need to copy from the example as well. Okay, so let's check that. Okay, it seems like we have no errors. So let's check actually what our program is doing, what our algorithm is doing. So first of all, we define two variables, names and output, names file path and output file path. So as you can see here, names.txt, this is the names.txt file that I will use as my input, and all the output I will place in persons.sql file. What is important, before I will proceed further, what is important is that if you will run this program as is, it will not work. It will not work because by default, the program will compile and the dedicated folder will be created for that, but the names.txt file will not be there. So it means that when you will run that by pressing this play button here, it will not work because it will be unable to find in the local folder the names.txt file. If you want to fix that, what you can do, you can basically select this file, and here in the properties window, you can see copy to output directory. Do not copy. You need to change it for copy always. Okay, you need to do that. And now, as soon as I will do the build and as soon as I will run my program, the names.txt file will be there together with my binaries. So everything will work fine. So what we have next? Next, we have a fail-safe mechanism. Sorry, we have a fail-safe mechanism, and the idea here is that we want to check that that file is actually exists before we will proceed in further. This is important as well as a part of, kind of a bigger concept of, let's say, handled exceptions versus non-handled exceptions. The big idea here is that if you want your program to be actually, kind of used by some other guys, you need to, or girls, I'm using guys as a kind of a general gender neutral form. So if you want this program to be used by someone else, you need to understand that those folks, they may not, let's say, pass all the required parameters in the required format. So that's why it's always important to basically check all your inputs, and in case you receive something in your inputs that should not be there, some invalid data, or like in this case the path to the file which do not exist, then you should basically exit, and you need to notify the user why we actually exited and why we didn't perform anything. But anyway, what we're doing next, we are basically reading all the files line by line, and then we're creating the stream writer for the output file path, and we are starting writing that data there. So first of all, what we have here, we have a get name method. Let me just open that method for you. And that get name method, what it basically handles for us, it took our name. It took basically one line from this names.txt file, okay? And then it splits it by the empty space, and by that it can say that, okay, when I took that line, when I split it, I have two items in my array. The first item with index 0 will be my first name, and the second item will be my last name. So the get name method basically creates kind of a structured data from our input file. Structured data with first and last name properties. The next one is get birthday. So what we have here we have a pretty much simple script that actually help us to generate some random date between 1930 and between 2010. So how it actually works is, you can see it creates start date, it creates end date, and then it creates a time span, basically by basically by subtracting the start date from the end date, and then it generates the random number, the random amount of minutes, and it adds it to the start date. So basically, in that way, we will generate the random time span each and every time. We will generate the random birth date for each and every person. More or less in the same way, we're generating the email for this person, again by using first name and last name. As you can see, we're using first name lowercase dot last name lowercase and acme.com domain, and then we're returning that as an email. So we get the birth date here, we get the email here. Now we have our first name, last name, birth date, and an email. And now we need to create a SQL statement, basically an insert statement for that data. So let me show you how it's done. So what we're doing here, let me probably move that a bit here. So what we're doing here, we're creating a string builder class, and then because we want to like our data look a bit more like in the real life, because in real life you may have some kind of gaps in your data, so we're doing more or less the same here. So for each and every third birthday, we'll basically enter a null, and for each and every fifth email, we will also enter a null. And then we will generate the SQL statement, insert into our persons table, first name, last name, birth date, email, and as the values here we will use first, last, birth date, and email address. Please pay attention that, again, the birth date here and the email address here, they are related to those variables that we created, not to those that we passed as input parameters. And when we do, and what we're doing after that, we are returning basically our string builder to string. So that generates us this 2 lines of code in our SQL file. Then we will be able to run against our database. And that's pretty much it. That's we get the SQL statement here. We write that as a line. It's actually 2 lines, but nonetheless. So then we write the statement go to basically execute that insert right away. And then we write to our console output that this statement was actually put to our file. So what I would like to do here, I will set this as a startup project, and I will just run this application right here. And I will just show you what will be the end result. Okay, sorry if it's a bit slow. I don't know why is that. Oh, it actually opens on another screen. Let me just pull it to this screen. Pum, 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 pum. Okay, so as you can see, everything was created successfully. So we're having here our data. And I will basically close this window. We don't need it anymore. What we can do now, I can basically open, wait a sec, open folder in File Explorer. Sorry, it opens on another screen again. So now I can go to my bin folder, debug, .NET Core, and as you can see here, I have my person's SQL script. I will open that. I will open that even with the notepad. Wait a sec. For some reason, it always opens on my other screen. So yeah, let me just zoom it a bit. So yeah, as you can see, I was able to open that in a notepad, and here I have my SQL script with all those inserts for all those peoples that we created as a part of our test generation algorithm. So I will take a short pause here, and this is basically it for the first part out of 4 parts. So do you have, guys, any questions related to this part, or should we proceed with the next one?
So I'll probably just add a little bit of context. So what we created, what we show now is that this is a way how we can generate test data in quantity. So when you're kind of launching your application, when we kind of work with database, we have some data and we can show some things. And in the first session, I was just copy pasting the same John user all the time in my sample, but this gives you more variety, and therefore kind of when testing, you can check more different variations in the code.
Yeah, for sure. And it's also important if you want to test let's say some of your applications, some of your algorithms on a bit bigger volume. Because in one hand, if you're creating an application, if you're using, I don't know, let's say 10 people as your test data set, it will basically gives you nothing, because even if all the algorithms, even if all the SQL queries are extremely awful on a volume of just 10 records in a table, you will be unable to understand that. So these kind of things, it can help you to generate a much bigger set of data. So then if you want to test, for example, that I created this SQL query, will it perform good or not? You can do that by easily generating a huge amount of data, putting that to your database, and then trying different approaches of how you will query the data to see, for example, which one will be faster. So yeah, I'm using literally the same approach on my projects as well. Okay, I've seen. Okay, there is a link that was posted in a chat for mokaru.com, a free database generator and API mocking tool. That's interesting. To be honest, I never used that tool, but yeah, from the name, it actually sounds quite promising. I can also show you another approach, if we will have time at the end, how you can also generate some test data and how you can manage that test data state together with the state of your entire database. But again, that's basically it. So let's actually proceed to the next part. Let's proceed to the lab number 3. Let me just open it here in my notes. Okay, yeah. So what we will do as a part of our next hands-on lab, we will create another project, and we will create a database project this time. So let me do it here. I will add a new project. And here I need to use the SQL Server database project. Next, that project will be of this name. Create. So what is the big idea here? What we're trying to achieve with this new project, and what is the reason in the first place why we need to have it here? So this is actually one of the ways for you. You can use this database project to maintain and manage basically the state of your database schema. So let's say that you are working in a team of, I don't know, like more than one actually developer on a project, and in that case what you need to have a way how, for example, you can add some schema changes, for example, add new table to the database, and then your colleague who works together with you on the same project and you are using the same database, who can also add some schema changes, for example, add a new table or add a column to the existing table, and so on and so forth. And having a database project, this is actually one of the ways how you can do that. That's definitely not the only way, but again, this is just one of the ways that that you can use. And the idea here is that with the database project, the way how you will basically manage the state, how you will manage the schema of your database, it will be more, let's say, closer to what you can experience with working with the database itself. So if you're more into SQL and stuff like that, then that should be definitely your first option to choose. But another option that probably we will also be able to show you today, that will be how you can actually manage the same thing but through the code. So if you are more closer to the application development part, if you're more closer to writing the C# code, there is another way how you can basically achieve more or less the same results. Of course, they are not exactly the same, and of course, each approach has its own pros and cons, but let's start with this one. So what we will have here, we have a database here, and let me actually show you how you can model, for example, your first table here. So what I will do, I will basically follow the way that we have in our example. I will create a folder here, which I will call DBO, and then I will create a folder here, which called tables, because that's always makes sense basically to organize everything in this kind of folders. And then here, what I can do, I can add a new item, and in my case, the new item will be the table. Okay, so I'm adding a table here, and I need to provide a name for that table. That will be persons, and I will add it. Okay, let's give it some time to load. Okay, I have it here. So what you can see here the designer of your table, and right underneath it, you can basically see the exact SQL statement that will be generated to create that table. So we can actually model our data structure here. So what we can do, we can say that, okay, we will have our ID, but we will use the unique identifier. So we will basically use GUIDs for these IDs, and that will also be our primary key. Next, we can say that we want to have a first name column, and the first name column will be wait a sec, will be nvarchar 50. Okay, so that will be basically the string, and that string can contain up to 50 characters. Next, last name. Also, that can be the nvarchar 50, and as you can see, both of them can allow null values. So both of them can actually be empty. Also have, oh, a sec. We also have birth date. And for the birth date, we will of course use date. We'll of course use date. And what else? We will have the email. And for the email, that will be nvarchar, but probably 50 will be not enough here. So let me just change it to 100. So that's basically it. So that's how easy you can model your table structure here. And as you can see, the exact script will be generated here underneath. What it actually means, it means that now this process became repeatable. So if you need to transfer basically that that schema, that table, whatever, to other person, you don't need to explain him like go there, add this column, that column. You just send him the exact script. So that means that you're using the same system to control the state of your database. What we can do as well here, we can actually say that for our unique identifier ID, we want by default to use the new ID function, which will mean that even if we will not provide the exact ID during the insert statement, the SQL Server itself will generate that ID for us. Okay. Okay, let's save it. So let's take a kind of a short pause with Visual Studio, and let's switch to the SQL Management Studio for a moment. Let me just refresh this database here. I just want to make sure that I have no tables here. Okay, I have no tables here whatsoever. So this is my empty database. And what I want to do, I want now to show you how you can actually deploy all the basically schema changes that you made here. Of course, I am not done yet, but I can deploy basically the interim state to my database. Right click here, and I do have a publish option. So I will go with the publish. Let's give it a minute. A new window, a new window should pop up. So what I need to do here, first of all, I need to provide a connection for my SQL Server and for my database. So I will go with edit. I have the old connection here. But I need to adjust it a bit. The name of the database used to be reg01. Now it's just reg. Let me test it first. Okay, test connection succeeded. Awesome. Okay, I will save it. Now, what will be the database name? The database name will be web register. And that's basically it. What I can do, I can click on publish. And again, it should take, I don't know, like 10, 15 seconds. Let's just give it some time. And what will happen, everything that I have here in my database project, now it should be applied and basically deployed to this database. So if I will go on tables and hit refresh, then the person's table is here. And if I will do the design, you will basically see that everything here is exactly the same as I designed before. Let me actually show you another kind of an interesting and cool thing that you can do basically with this project. Let me just delete this table for a moment. Let's say I don't need it anymore. Let's say that I have was it deleted? Yeah, it was just slow. So let's say that I have this brand new empty database. And again, let's assume that I'm not working alone. I'm working in a team of, again, more than one developer on a project. So what I can do, another option with this database project, again, right click on it, publish. I need to provide, I do believe that was this. Yep. What I can do as well, as you can see, another option here is to generate script. So I can click on generate script, and what it will produce, it will not deploy those changes directly, but it would rather create a one single script that will basically represent all the changes that needs to be applied for the database to actually make it work and make it up to the same version that I have here in my database project. So as you can see, a bunch of variables that needs to be set, some kind of a checks, some kind of a fail-safe checks. But at the end of the day, what you have here, at the end of the day, you have the same create table statement. And then you have alter table statement when we basically add the new ID for ID column as a default value. Why I'm showing you this, why this is so important, because again, I do believe that even as a part of this course, but please correct me if I'm wrong, you will talk about the automation. And if you are talking about the automation, it's really crucial that all the processes and all the way of workings that you will use in your team, they need, first of all, they needs to be repeatable. So I want to be able to repeat the same set of actions again and again and again. And the other thing that also is very important, but we will talk about that probably a bit later during our talk today. The other thing that is super important is to guarantee the idempotency, basically, of your process. So what I mean by idempotency, that term, it actually sounds quite funny, and I'm not sure that I'm even pronouncing it correctly. Sorry, English is not my first language. English is my third language, actually. But nonetheless, the big idea of the idempotency is that if I have a process of applying, I don't know, let's say some changes or inserting some test data to my database or whatever else, that process needs to be repeatable and it doesn't need to be dependent on all the previous states or previous actions that I may take. So for example, if I'm talking about creating a script, inserting some test data to my database, I want to create that algorithm, that mechanism in a way that I can repeat it over and over and over again. And at the end of the day, it will still produce the same result. So a quick question. I am not sure that we are actually having, like any kind of a prizes or raffle or at least like a virtual candies that we can provide to our audience if they will be able to answer that question correctly. But let me just ask you this question. You can think of it and then please put your answer to the chat. In terms of SQL as a language in general, we know that we have four statements. Okay, we know that we have select, insert, update, and delete. So my question to you folks will be the following. So among those four kinds of queries and or commands that we can run against our database, which are idempotent by design and which are not? So the question is, which queries or which commands out of those four I can run against the database multiple times and they will produce the same result, and which of them, if I will run against my database a few times, it can actually produce different results. Okay, so that will be the question. And yeah, I hope I hope that you would like to try actually your knowledge and check on that. And I will proceed with my demo. So what I will do next, oh, wait a sec, I just lose my mouse pointer. What I will do next, I will just create a new folder here. I will just create a folder called scripts. And why I actually need to have that folder scripts here, because what we created as a part of our, let's say, previous steps, we created that test that persons.sql script with the test data. So I also want to manage that as a part of uh, my application. I also want to put that, for example, under the source control. So let me just create a new folder here. I will call it test data. And what I will do next, wait a sec, I will also open that in File Explorer, and I will just show you how I can copy and paste files from one directory to another. So what I have here, I here have my persons. I will basically copy this guy from here and I will paste it here. Okay, so now I have it here and I just need to add it as an existing item. Wait a sec, it's under scripts, test data, persons. Okay, now I have it here as a part of my solution. The person scripts with the list of all my inserts that I will use to manage my test data for my database. Okay, so what I need to do next, because the idea is that person SQL script will be applied automatically, but for this guy, I definitely need to come up with some other approach. I need to explain somehow to the database project that that particular file needs to be applied after we deploy all the other database objects to our database. So what I will do, oh, wait a sec, I will create it here. In this scripts folder, I will add new item, and this time I will say that I would like to create a script. And what I want to create here, I would like to create a post-deployment script. So that will mean that as soon as I will deploy all the schema changes, all the tables, and la la la, I will run those commands that will be listed here in my post deployment script. So let me just add it here. Okay, and what I have here, as you can see, this is the more or less simple template, and it says that I need to, if I want to include some other files, then what I need to do, basically, I need to use this kind of command template, okay? And I need to put the path to my SQL file here. So in my case, what it will be, because the post script deployment file itself is underneath the scripts folder, so that should be enough for me to just do test data persons. Okay. So what will happen now? What will happen now? I will save this. Let me actually try to apply those changes as is to my database, and let's see what will happen. Right click here, publish. Hmm. That's an interesting statement. It was unable to build. Syntax error here. Okay, wait a sec. That's something strange. Let me try to rebuild it again, because I tried that before and it works perfect. I don't know why it's not working right now. That's interesting. Okay, wait a sec. Let me just, for a moment, open a backup version because maybe I missed something. So I do have a backup version which works perfectly. So let me check. Yeah. Let me check actually why it's not working like expected, and then we will continue. So yeah, that's actually exactly what were needed, this exact solution. This can actually be pretty annoying, I know, but yeah, and I mean, like, I'm sorry for that, but this is actually the way how you can actually learn the things. So you create something, and then it may work, or it may not work. But this is, as I was saying, this is the way how you usually learn. And don't be afraid to ask for help, and don't be afraid to kind of roll back to the previous working version of your application, basically what I'm doing right here, right now.
That's so
Just
true. And I think it's actually one of the kind of positive things for live coding and watching people live code, because
exactly.
it's in a sterile kind of sample or tutorial, you'll only get what was pre-recorded, pre-tried for you, and it's the only pass. But of course, the place where somebody will fail is a place where most likely others also will fail. So it's
Yeah.
a learning experience.
Okay. This is kind of a strange because the scripts are literally the same. So let's okay, you know what? Let me actually try it a bit differently. So let me delete this file here. And let me add a new file, which will be a regular script file. And that will be just a script. I will, wait a sec. I will name it persons. Oh, I lose my pointer again. Okay, so that will be our script. And what I'm doing now, I'm basically going here and I'm trying to just copy and paste the content. And let's see what will happen. Okay, it's not happy still. Okay, let me see what other options do I have here. So let's yeah, let's try to do this script that is not included in the build, because that's probably where I'm failing. Yeah, that was probably it. So what was the big issue there? The big issue there was that when I created that SQL script in the first place, I didn't notice that, and then I made the same mistake again, and then only at the third attempt, I more or less realized what the mistake was. The mistake was that it tries to include that script, basically with the test data. It tries to include that into the, let's say, build pipeline itself. So it tried to treat that as a part of the project. But despite that script being a part of the project, it should actually, I mean, like, should not be the part of the project which we will use to create the schema, because we are about to run that script here. We're about to run that script here, And let me try to build everything again. Okay, now as you can see, 2 succeeded, 0 failed. Awesome. So now we can proceed. So what I will do the publish. And again, let me use this database, web register database, and let me do the publish. Okay, everything seems to be working nice. So what I want to do here, I want to refresh. As you can see, I have my persons table, and I can select the. Oh, okay, it seems like I need to reconnect for some reason. Let's try to do that. Okay. So let's try to select my rows again. And as you can see, I have all my data here with all those nulls that we deliberately programmed to be here. So it means that everything is working as expected, except it's actually not. So I was talking to you about the idempotency and what it means. It means that basically if I will try to run the same script again, let's see what will happen. I will publish the same project to the same database again. So web register database, okay, publish. Everything seems to be working fine, but as you can see here, I had 300 rows. So I will just leave that window open and let me run the second query. And now, as you can see, that's 600 rows. That means that we actually kind of break, or we did not respect the principle of idempotency. That means that if I will, for example, next time tiny modification, if I will, I don't know, like go here and add a new column, for example, phone or something like that, I don't know, and then I will apply the same project against my database, I will again have basically an extra batch of the same 300 records. What you can do with that? Of course, with that, you can basically do a bunch of different things. But again, for the test purposes, what we can show you, what we can recommend you to do is that you can go to the post deployment script and you can put a statement more or less like, oh, wait a sec, I by accident saved this one. I don't need to have phone here in this table. Yeah, sorry. So you can put a statement like here. So what it will do in this case, it will basically deploy all the schema changes, and then as at point when it comes to post deployment, at that point it will basically check if there are any records in this person's table, and if there are any, it will remove all of them, and only after that it will apply our script. So what I can do next, let me publish this project again. Web register, okay, publish. Okay, it's there. And again, I will leave those two guys open. And I will run it the third time, and as you can see, I have only 300 rows now. So now it means that each and every time I will run it, I will always have the same old 300 rows. So on that one, I will take a short pause again, and guys from the audience, do you have any questions related to this part of our session today? Okay. It seems like no questions. Okay, so let me ask you this question then. So I already asked you the first question, which of the SQL statements are idempotent. So you have that one to answer. But let me ask you maybe even a bit more tricky question this time. So this mechanism, that I just presented to you. Oh, wait a sec. I lose my mouse again. Oh, here it is. So this mechanism that I just presented to you, that we will basically clean up the table and then we will insert the same data again. So of course, it has the obvious flaw that if we will add some extra data manually, as a part of, I don't know, some other activities that we have, if we will add some data manually, then it will basically scrap even that data from the database, and it always end up with a nice and clean database with only this predefined list of persons. But is there any other issues with this particular case, how we implemented it right now? Is there any other issues that you see that can be improved? And to help you actually think about it, let me also, you know what? Let me actually open somewhere here. The script itself, so you will also see how we insert data in the first place. I will do it like this. So this is how we insert our data in the first place. This is how we ensure that we will always have the same 300 records in our test database. So the first issue that we discussed was that if we will add something manually, it will remove that the next time we will deploy the database. But is there any other issues that you see here? I will give you, I don't know, like 10, 15 seconds to think about it. If you want, you don't need even to write that in a chat. You can just unmute yourself and we can discuss. But if not, I will try to answer that question myself. No? Okay.
What about columns?
Which columns?
You said if you add another columns which are, for example, can't be null, that person SQL will fail.
Okay, that's actually a good example. Yeah, agree. I was thinking about another example, but I will buy this one as well. So yeah, this is a good example. But there is one more, and I was thinking about actually another thing. So let's try to compare. I hope you can see that because the Zoom here is maybe not really kind of a broadcasting friendly. But anyway, so what you can see here on my screen. So this is the latest run. We had 300 records, and you can see that the first ID here, the first GUID, ends with A72. Okay, and this was our first run, and it ends with 11A. Because we're not explicitly setting those IDs in our scripts. So it means that each and every time we will run it, it will generate a new set of IDs for the same records. And it means that as soon as your basically database module became more complex, if you will need to add a second table, a third table, or whatever, configure the foreign keys, the relations basically between those databases, then it can become an issue. So it works fine for this simple example, but please be aware that if you're working with a bit more complex example, then you probably will need to explicitly set your IDs as well, especially if you need to reference that ID from another table. Okay, that was good. Let me actually switch to the next example. So let me just check what I have here. Oh no, sorry, that was not it. That and this is probably no, that was not it as well. Yeah, this is the next part. Okay, so let's switch for the next part. The next part is how to work with the EntityFramework Core itself. And on that part, what I really like to demonstrate, and we actually had that conversation internally, and that was quite fun, because another interesting thing about me is that despite working with the Microsoft technologies for like almost my entire career, as I was saying, the last maybe like 7 or 8 years, I worked with Microsoft technologies, also very hard from non-Microsoft ecosystems. So for example, currently I'm using the Windows laptop, but I also have a Linux laptop. I also have a Mac laptop. I need to have all those different kind of hardware and operational systems to basically do my job properly and to run different kinds of experiments. But what I like about that variety is that in one hand, of course, the Visual Studio as a tool, it can work, yeah, of course,
Okay, I think we are about done with the break and can continue.
Okay, so let's continue then. Yeah, I know that you basically lose me at some point, so I will start more or less from the same part that I do believe I lose my connection. So yeah, what we were talking about here, we were talking about that as a third part that I want to present you today, I would like to show how to work with the EntityFramework Core itself. So what I will need to do, I will need to first of all add a new project here that will be a regular class library. Okay, so I will search for this template, and here, class library, that's what I needed. C#, not F#. Next. And the name of that library, again, I will use the same as we're using for our example. So that will be webregister.data. Next. And again, .NET Core 3, but if you're using .NET Core 5, if you're using .NET 5, that will literally work the same. Okay, so we have our project here. So what we need to do right now, we also do have a database in place. There are two different ways how you can work with EntityFramework Core. You can use either database first, or you can use the code first approach. But in our case today, we will use the database first approach. So what I have, what I have here, I here have the script. I will put that script here. So this is the command, and you will be able to find that command basically in an examples. So if you will run .NET EF DB context scaffold, provide a connection string, and say that this is the Microsoft EntityFramework Core SQL Server, kind of a database. What it will do, it will basically connect the database, and it will create a set of classes for you. It will create a set of classes for you that you will be able then to use to manipulate your data in a database. I'm using actually a bit different connection strings. So I'm using localDB. LocalDB, and here, let me just check it here. That's MS SQL localDB. Okay. LocalDB. My database is called just a web register, and That's basically it. So yeah, as you can see, I just adjusted a bit the connection string. Another thing that I also need to do, I need to install a few packages, and I will show to you which packages I'm talking about here. So into this data application, what I need to do, I need to install basically two packages. The first of all, I need to install the package which called Microsoft EntityFramework Core SQL Server. This guy here. I will need to install this one because it will allow me actually to kind of automatically generate and work with all the classes, all the context tests, and all the basically connections that I need to open to my SQL server. So it will do all the heavy lifting for me. And yeah, as you will see at the end of the demo, it will basically work like a charm in a way that I just have my C# classes. I populate them through my C# regular code, and then by some magic they just appear as the records in the database. But in addition to that, I do have another assembly, another library, which is called design. So that's Microsoft Entity Framework Core design. I need to have this guy as well. And the reason why I need to have this library is because I want to be able to actually use also that class library that I have here. I want to be able to use that for the design purposes as well. So basically, I want to use it to maintain all my data changes, all my data schema changes, and so on and so forth. So those two guys are there. I will just remove this. I will just remove this class CS1, and what I will do, of course, we know that we can basically run this command from the Visual Studio itself, from the PowerShell command line. But what I will show you guys today, just as a kind of a as an example, that I can even open that in my file explorer, and I can run the PowerShell console here. And again, it doesn't need to be a PowerShell. It can be basically a regular command line. I'm just using the PowerShell because that was faster. But the idea here is that if I will use that command, even outside Visual Studio, it should still work. So let's, oh, wait a sec. Something went wrong. Okay. Just don't pay attention to that. The idea here was that I was here within my web register data project. I run the .NET Entity Framework dbcontext scaffold command, provided the connection string, provided a bunch of other extra parameters, and as you can see, I was able to run that totally from outside Visual Studio. So it means that if you are working with that, even not on a Windows machine, that will work the same way. So this is basically the power of a .NET Core. And now if I will go here, what I will see, oh, no, it's actually there. So what I will see that I have a person as a class, and as you can see, this person class is basically represents the same table that I have in my database. It automatically generates the ID, first name, last name, birth date, and email properties for this class for me, which is awesome. And I also have my database context. And within this database context, as you can see, I have a DB set of persons, and this is basically what I can use then to get my data, and I will show it to you later to get my data, but I can actually use that to write an entity, link you to entity or link you to SQL queries. I can run them against this property, and it will allow me not to work on a SQL level if I don't like. It will allow me work more closer to the C# level and manipulate with all my entities in a database in a way that is closer to the C# and .NET development in general, rather than working with the SQL. Again, it's always about pros and cons. So as on the pro side, that always will be faster in terms of the code writing, but as a disadvantage, you will understand that because it will still needs to be translated to the SQL statement, at the end of the day, the way how it will translate your C# query basically to your SQL query, that way may not always be optimal. So again, as basically with any other task in programming in general, it's always about pros and cons. But in terms of, let's say, usability and user friendliness for the developer, this approach is, of course, the best. What we also need to do to basically make it work, okay? So first of all, at some point, we will need to connect that to our web application. And as you can see here, by default, it uses the same connection string that I provided actually when I run this command. Okay, but you understand that if you're working on a local machine, then that connection string will be the same. In addition to that, you can also agree for having the same name of your SQL instance to have the same name of the database on all the machines across all the dev teams. In that case, it will also work for the dev team, but at some point you will need to deploy that to different environments. You will need to deploy that to the QA environment, and at like UAT environment, stage, production, and whatever. So that means that it's, I will put it like that, that's definitely not the best practice to hard code your connections in here. And according to the DevOps practices, you need to maintain your code and your configuration to your code separately. What it actually means? It means that if you will go to your web project here, you have an awesome file called app settings. And even more awesome is that here you have an override for the development environment. But nonetheless, let's talk about this app settings here. So what you can do, you can actually add a new section here, and this section will be connection strings. And here within the connection string, you can create a connection string. You can name it, I don't know, let's say as we use in our example, you can name it the default connection, and then you need to provide a value for that connection string. And again, for the value, for the purposes of this demo, I will use this value for my local database. Okay, so that will be basically the value of my connection string. And now another thing that you also need to basically do, I lose my pointer again, sorry. Another thing that you also need to do, you need to, first of all, you need to add your data project now basically to your web project. So you can do, sorry, you can do it like this. Okay. And as soon as it's done, you can go to the startup class. And here you can just register your DB context. And we will do it. Oh. Wait a sec. Yep. We'll do it like here. So what we're doing, we are registering our DB context here. So the next time in our controllers, or basically any other places, when we will ask to inject the implementation basically of this web rec context of our database context class, what we will do, we will inject the exact copy, and it will be configured in a way that it will use the SQL Server driver, and it will configure the SQL Server driver using the connection string with the name default connection. So this default connection needs to be the same as you have here, default connection. In that way, what will happen during the startup, it will basically grab that connection string from your configuration, and it will inject the database context to all the other places that you need it in your application. And again, in that case, what you will be able to do, you will be able to build your binaries just once, and then you will be able to distribute those binaries across all the different environments that you have, as I was saying, like local environment, QA, stage, prod, whatever. The only one thing that needs to be changed in that case will be this app settings JSON file, and the only one thing that needs to be changed in that file will be this particular connection string. Okay, so on that one, I will also take a short pause. Do we have any questions in the chat or live regarding this topic?
Not a question, but maybe comment, as we were recommending people to kind of keep their source code in their repositories, and especially if you are using the kind of free public ones on GitHub and etc. Keep in mind not only the connection string, but all the kind of secrets that you post, and try not to check them into public repositories. That's always something to keep in mind. So verify the files that go there and exclude them if needed. So sometimes I've done kind of that I have kind of these two app settings, and either have a small script that just switches the values, or kind of manually just renaming the files. Well, this one is the actual one, and this one is a demo one for checking in the public repository, which has maybe placeholder values, so people who might want to use it can replace that. But I think application secrets and things like that is something we will touch on when we talk about Azure deployment.
Yeah, and I can probably kind of elaborate a bit on that. So if we're talking about that part, so as you can see here, you have basically two copies of this file. You have app settings, and you also have app settings development. So app settings development, yeah, exactly as you were saying. So first of all, you can add this as a kind of explicit exclude to your source control, so you will have this file only locally, and you will not check in that to your source control. So that's the first thing. And what you can actually do, you can, for example, you can remove it from here. Okay. Oh, wait a second. And you can actually add your connection string here. In that case, if you will run that locally, it will still be able to find your connection string, and it will be still able to find the default connection, and everything will work as expected. But again, because we excluded this app settings.development.json file from the source control, it will never be checked in. So this is actually really kind of a good example of what you should do and what you should not do when you're working with the source control. So yeah, in that case, let's actually switch to our final topic. Let me just open my notes here. Yeah, so what our final topic will be about, we will basically add two more projects here. So first of all, under our source folder, we will add a new project, and that will be the class library again. So I will use the class library template again, and this time that will be web register services. Next, create. And we will use this library to basically create all the services that we will use to access our data. Let me just clean this up a bit. And in addition to that, we also have this test folder. So in addition to that, what we will do, we will add a new project here. And I do assume that we will use the MS test framework. So let me actually try to find. I do believe that that's the correct template. Unit test project, C#, Linux, macOS, la. Even if it's not, basically the test project is just yet another class library, so that will be super easy for us to convert it. So let me create a tests assembly here. Okay, so let's start with the services then. So what we will have for our services, first of all, we will implement the interface, and then we will implement the service itself. So let me just add new item. Oh, come on, it's so slow today. I will just add a new interface, and that will be iPerson service. And that interface will have only one method. It will have only one method, and as you can see, because this interface, we will use it to work with our database. So that means that we also need to include a dependency here for our data project. So it will be able to resolve this class person. Okay. So this is again a very good example of how you actually need to work with your data, because it may happen that at some point, first of all, at some point you may decide to switch the implementation of your data layer. That happens not often, but still that happens. On the other hand, what also interface helps you to do, it helps you to keep under control the implementation part of it. So what I'm saying here is that as a person who is responsible for the data layer, I always want to keep everything under my control, because I mean, like, as a team member who works on this part, I know better than everyone else on a team how my data layer is structured. I know the exact ways of how I would like to query the data, and so on and so on. So that is why I don't want to, let's say, allow my other teammates to query those tables directly, because it can affect a bunch of things. I want to provide them with an interface, and I will be responsible for writing the queries myself. So I was talking about that. Let me create a new class now. And now we will work with the implementation of our person service. So that will be a regular class. That will be also a public class. And that class will basically inherit iPerson service. Yeah, I will use the default implementation for now. But yeah, I would probably, again, for the sake of time, I will just copy and paste everything from the example, and then I will just explain how it actually works and what we have here. So as you can see, I inherited my person service class as an implementation of this iPerson interface. What I need to have here, I need to have a web register context. I need to have my DB context here. And again, because I passed this as an argument to my to my constructor, it means that each and every time I will create an instance of my person service, I will be able to pass a different implementation of my database context. You will be able to see that later in a test why it's so important, but for now, let's just consider that as not only the best practice, but potentially as, like the only one, let's say, practice that that you need to follow. Okay, so next, the implementation here is pretty much simple. So we will do list all persons asynchronously. So what we will do, we will take our context, and we will just get the DB set of type person, and then we will just do toList async. So we will basically grab all the records from that table, we will return it to list, we will do that asynchronously, and again, in case we want to cancel that job, we will also provide an additional cancellation token. If you will leave that parameter empty, that's fine, it will work the same way as without the cancellation token. As I was saying, you just need to have that to basically have a bit more control over your code and over your queries to the database. So what we can do next? Next, we can actually start working on our test, and let's create just one simple test. Again, we don't have much time, so I will probably do copy and pasting. So what I will do here, first of all, I will rename this class. And here is basically how our test class will look like. And let me again explain what we're actually having here. I probably should add a few dependencies. For example, like data and service. Okay, and I also do believe that, that I also need to add a few more assemblies here. I basically need to add the EntityFramework Core in memory assembly. Let me just do that really quick. Okay, install. Okay. Oh, I just realized that in our example, we were using NUnit. And I'm not sure that we have NUnit here installed. We probably have by default MSUnit installed. Yeah, okay. Okay, so we can fix that. We can fix that really fast. What I need to do, I just need to install the NUnit itself. So basically, MS test and NUnit, they are just like two different frameworks that you can use to automate your test runs. In general, the concept is the same, but of course, each and every framework just provides you with the different set of features. That's it.
Yeah. They name the attributes a bit differently, but I think nowadays they mostly kind of feature complete, well, one way or the other. So
I mean, like,
not
actually,
much difference.
Yeah, I mean, like, actually, I also prefer a bit more NUnit, but that's probably because I was working with NUnit more than with MSUnit. But in general, yeah, I mean, like, currently, as far as I know, there is another framework which is also kind of quite popular, especially across the .NET community. That's called the XUnit. They took a bit different approach to implement the test framework, but currently, as you were saying, they are basically more or less the same. So Anyway, let's actually get back to our test class. So what we have here, in our test class, we have our web register context and we have our person service. So what we're doing during the setup? During the setup, we're basically creating a DB context option builder, and we are saying that we will apply that for the web register context and we will use in-memory database. This is the perfect scenario how you can actually do that for the unit test, because as you understand, in-memory database, it will not give you any persistence whatsoever. But if you need to do your unit testing, you don't need to have that persistence. You just need to basically try and test that your services will work. And then as soon as you validated that, you can throw away everything. You can throw away all that dummy data that you were basically creating for this test run. And then we are creating the DB context, basically initializing the DB context and initializing our person service. And then what we have here, we have the test for get all persons method. The test is actually kind of crafted in three parts: arrange, act, and assert. You may actually see in internet a bit different acronym for that. Also, they can go by given, when, then, but that's basically the same. So in this arrange section, what you're actually doing, you're preparing, you're setting up the initial state of your database. And as you can see, what we're doing here, we are creating a person object, and we are adding that person object to our database, and we need to call the save changes async method. So what will happen in that case, the entity framework, because we called the add async method, it will understand that the person is a new object, basically, and because the person is a new object, it will mark it for the next call of save changes. It will mark it as an entity that needs to be inserted. So pay close attention to this one, that when you actually call add async, you just adding this record to be tracked. You're not actually saving it to the database. And then as soon as the changes were saved, what we're doing, we're actually doing our act. And in this section, which called act here, you need to run the set of commands that you are actually want to validate that they work as expected. And here we're calling for list all async method. And then at the final section, assert, what we're doing, we need to put a set of asserts of how we will make sure that in our actual result we have the same that we expected. And we're validating that by first of all checking that this is not null, and also we're checking that it returns one entity. What we can also, what we can also do, we can also do assert, for example, are equal, and our expected value will be, I don't know, let's say testacme.com, and our actual value will be result 0.email, something like that. Okay, it may not be needed for each and every case, but I just wanted to show it to you here as an example. So what we can do next, we can basically run our tests to make sure that everything working fine, everything is green. It may take some time, yeah, because it needs to warm up. But yeah, I mean, like at the end of the day, oh, I actually have my test results on another screen again. I will just move it here. So this is my test results for this run. As you can see, I had only one test, and that test name was get all persons underscore success, and it passed. It means that all the asserts here passed, and we're good to go. So this was that final part of the demo that I wanted to show you today, guys. So I see that we do have some activity in the chat. Let me actually check what we have in the chat. In chat, we have a comment that for those who couldn't publish, yeah, that's actually, that's always actually a tricky part that when you worked with data types like datetime, it can be tricky. The same can go also for the values where you, for example, want to insert some, I don't know, like a float values, and then in some countries you may use like a dot to separate basically the I mean, like in some cases, in some locales, the limiter can be dot. In some cases, that can be comma. So you also need to pay a close attention to that. Basically, the same as with the datetime example. So yeah, I face that as well, almost on a daily basis. Okay, so we're not having any more questions, it seems like. So yeah, let me actually get back to the question that I was asking you at the beginning, not at the beginning, but more or less an hour ago. So by default, by design, which commands, which queries are idempotent? If you will think about it, then 2 out of 4 queries are idempotent. First of all, the select is idempotent by design. It means that you can run the same select as many times as you want, and it will always produce the same result. The next query that is also kind of idempotent by design will be the delete query, because if you will delete something, especially if you will list the primary key, then again, it will delete that record from the database, and when you will run it again, even if that record will not be there, your system will still end up in the same state. But with create and insert, with insert and updates, this is a bit more trickier, because the insert is not idempotent by default, because it will always create more and more new records. The update idempotency is again highly affected by the way how you will actually craft your update query in the first place, because even if you will put explicit, let's say, primary key within your update statement, still that may not be good enough, because what I can do, I can do something like update field last name equals last name plus dash or plus underscore or whatever. And in that case, again, your update will not be idempotent. So this was the answer that I was expecting from you guys. But what I also have here, Yanis, I probably need to kind of consult with you on that one. I do have a few things which are, let's say, more or less kind of a senior stuff. I can spend maybe like 10 minutes or demonstrating those things, or we can do some other stuff, because we still have more or less 15 minutes till the end of the presentation.
I think it's good thing still to mention those things, as we will keep the recording. It's anyway something for everyone who joined and will be looking at it afterwards. They can return and revisit this. So I'll probably add a separate time code then for this section, then some advanced tips and tricks, if I understand correctly.
Yeah, because I'm actually a huge fan of the automation. In the first place, I do believe that, like, it's always nice when you can say that you share something with the famous person, and I don't know, folks, maybe you know that guy, maybe you not. I genuinely don't know, but some of you may actually at least heard about him. He goes by name Jeremy and last name Clarkson. And what I actually, what I admire about Jeremy Clarkson, and what I know we share with him, is that we are both allergic to manual labor. Okay, so that is actually why I'm such a big fan of the automation in the first place. And I want to show you one of my demo kind of a project that I prepared, and I presented that on a few conferences already. First of all, I would like to show you the approach how you can manage the state of your database through code, because what we've seen today, we've seen how you can manage the state of the database using the database first approach, but I would like to show you the code first approach. And also, I would like to show to you how you can automate that for future deployments. And also, if you're working in an extremely huge team and you have a dedicated people who are responsible for, let's say, controlling the schema changes in a database, and also the dev team and maybe security team and so on and so forth, how you can actually make all those folks talk in one language. So what I have here, again, I have kind of a dummy project, dummy application. It needs to take some time to restore all the dependencies. But what I have here, first of all, I have a design assembly, and I'm using actually a bit different approach of working with my, let's say, initial test data here. So what I'm having here, I have these files, which I called packs, okay? And I designed them in a way, let me just close all but this. I designed them in a way that first of all, I have a method which called apply. And this method apply, as you can see, it will basically add, using the same entity framework, it will add a bunch of test data to my database. For example, it will add an employee, Anton Boyko, John Doe, Jane Doe, and also Uncle Bob. And in addition to that, I have a method which called isPresent, which will return true or false, and which will basically run some custom check to make sure that either this spec was applied or was not applied to my database. And then I have a class which called Dataset Orchestrator. In this class, I hard-coded that pack01 needs to apply first, then I need to apply pack02, but I have a method called applyAll, and what I'm doing here, I'm basically iterating through my list of the data packs. For each of them, I called isPresent, and if it's not, then I will apply that data pack to my database. In that way, I don't need to create any SQL scripts. I can control everything through code. And again, this is also a console application. I get my connection string from my arguments, and then I will skip that migrate statement for a moment, but nonetheless, as you can see what I'm doing here, I'm creating my DB context, providing the connection string that I get from the arguments. I'm creating my dataset orchestrator, and I'm basically running apply all method to also kind of apply all the data changes, not only the schema changes, but also all the data changes to my database. So this is the first thing that I wanted to show to you. And another thing is that if you will use the code first approach, then what you will have. You will have, as I have here, for example, the set of entities, but now it's up to you, up to the developer on how you will explain to the SQL server, for example, which exact columns needs to be created in your database. As you can see, I have employee entity here, and I mark it with the I marked each property with different attributes. So, for example, the key attribute here will mean that will be a primary key created for attribute ID. The required attribute for name, which will mean that I need to make this field required. And for example, here, social security number, SSN. In this case, I'm using string, but I also know that at least in Ukraine, the social security number is always a 10-digit number. So I'm using string here, and I can say that that will be always 10 characters long. And then I run commands basically through my command line here, more or less in the same way as I showed you here with .NET EF scaffold. I'm just running .NET migration add, and I'm adding automatically the migrations. And this is my first migration, for example, the initial DB migration. As you can see, what will happen, it will basically check my data model, which I have here in my entities folder, and it will create a corresponding statement for creating the same structure in my database. And as you can see, it will always create up and down migration. So what it actually means, it means that I can not only kind of upgrade my model to the latest changes, I can always upgrade my model to basically literally any checkpoint that I have. In my case here, I have two checkpoints. I have the initial DB migration checkpoint, and I also have employee personal data checkpoint, where I'm basically adding two more columns, the social security number and the year of birth. And again, important thing is that I didn't write any line of code that goes under the migration folder. All that code, it was generated from my model basically here. And one other thing that I also wanted to show to you, and again, that's on another screen, so let me move it here. So another thing that I also wanted to show you is basically what you can do in terms of Azure DevOps, how you can actually automate and compare the changes of your basically schema changes that you control through the entity framework. So let me just check what I have here. Probably start with this pipeline. Probably will go with, oh, that's actually an interesting thing. I didn't understand that I didn't sign in, but I saw the lack of buttons. Let me just sign in really quick. That project is public, by the way. That is why I was able to check it, even, I mean, like to see what I have within that project, even without being kind of, logged in to the Azure DevOps. Okay, now it's a bit better. So I will go here. I will go here. Oh, sorry, not run pipeline. I would like to edit the pipeline. So this is my automation pipeline, and what I wanted to highlight here explicitly, let me just show it to you. Okay, no, that's not in this pipeline. Wait a sec. Let me go by this pipeline. I definitely have it here. I just need to switch for another branch, which is this one. So what I have here, what I wanted to highlight explicitly is that the other thing is, you can see what I'm doing here in terms of my automation pipelines. First of all, I'm installing the same .NET Entity Framework tool. I installed that tool globally as well on my build agent. But what I'm doing next, I'm actually calling .NET tool Entity Framework migrations script. And then I need to pass the path to my project. I need to pass the path to my startup project. I need to also pass the output. And as you can see, the output is a SQL file. And then I need to also pass the key idempotent. What it will create at the end of the day if I will run this command like this. Let me just open the latest pipeline. So as a part of my artifacts, as you can see, I have two SQL schemas. Both were created with that command. And let me just download this artifact here. And let me just open it with, I don't know, like Visual Studio Code, let's say. And let me actually pull it out to this screen. Okay. Again, some issues probably with my machine. What I can do, I can open that with a notepad because I really want to show you guys what I do have inside that script. So this is actually what I have inside that script. As you can see, I never basically write any line of this SQL statement, but what it's actually doing, so first of all, it's checking, do I have the Entity Framework migration history table? If not, it will create that table. Then it will check in that table, do I have my initial DB migration? If I don't, what it will do, it will create this table. It will create this table, and then it will insert the record to my migration history that the migration with this ID was already applied. So it means that what I can do, I can generate that idempotent script automatically through the command line. I can grab it and then I can apply it to any database, and I don't care was it updated to the latest version already, was it updated to, I don't know, some kind of an interim version or something like that. It will always work. It will always upgrade me to the latest version of my database. So this is another perfect example what you can do with the Entity Framework Core, with the way how you can manage your data models, your data structure through the code using the same tool as we were showing to you before during our first 4 demos. And yeah, what I will probably do, again, because I was unable to actually show everything, but what I will do, I will basically take that. Okay, now I have a bit bigger issue, but anyway, I will basically check the links for those public projects that are on Azure DevOps. As I was saying, you can go there in read-only mode. You can check how the pipelines are defined and stuff like that. I will grab all those links and I will also share it with you guys. We will put it somewhere in our README file. So if you want to go really deep and really advanced technique of what you can do with Entity Framework, with Azure DevOps, with automation, yeah, feel free to check those. Okay, and I do believe that we are right on time.
That's wonderful. Thank you a lot.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks for inviting me.
Okay, we still will need some minutes to kind of look at what we still need to do for next, and I will announce the tasks for the next session. But yeah, a lot of thank you for the presentation and for the live coding. It was very interesting to watch, especially, well, for me, even for me, because in my project, I'm very used to using Oracle nowadays. And well, you could say I'm stuck with Oracle for a while now. So it's interesting to catch up. So what's happening with Entity Framework, and well, some of the things look quite easy to do. But yeah.
Yeah, thanks. Unfortunately, I'm not so rich to work with Oracle, but yeah, in general, in general, I do believe that for the Entity Framework, there also should be some drivers that you can use, and you can basically repeat the same demos that we run today for the Oracle database. I do believe that there used to be drivers, for that.
Yeah, they have kind of caught up with that. It took quite a long time, and hence the reason why we haven't started to use that, because, well, for us it started quite a while ago. But I think nowadays Entity Framework is actually quite flexible, both, well, to what database it can connect and kind of abstract away the SQL or whatever is underneath layer.
Yeah, exactly, yeah.
But okay, for now, let's switch back to presentation. I'll share the screen in a moment. So yeah, That concludes the live coding session for today. If you still will have questions or want some help with a specific issue that you have, do reach out in Discord and ask for help. We'll try to organize and support you. For next session, we'll be focusing on testing. So today we already touched on one test. Well, we'll do more in next session and focus mostly on unit testing, dependency injection, what it is, why we want to use it, and also on good practices and code quality. If we'll have some time, I'll probably also touch on code security and some topics like that, although those are too wide to cover in the short span that we have. But at least I'll give you a short intro on that. Then, as usual, materials are available in our GitHub, and join us on Discord if you're new and want to continue kind of following the program, because there we are able to kind of answer your questions more in detail and provide more help with specifics. And yeah, for next session, so the business case remains the same as usual. So today we went more with the kind of standard reference labs, but I think I will kind of do my own homework and adapt the intro that I started in last session to kind of build on today's topics. So I also will have my data written and read from database. And then next time we can continue from that point, or you can follow from the labs or from your own code implementation. So for next session, you will have to add unit tests to your application, and to explain, so to actually have unit tests, so tests that cover only specific methods or parts in the code, you will need to get familiar with dependency injections. So the documents are linked in the GitHub. Once you have dependency injection, it will allow you to then write those more granular tests for specific methods. The target that I would like to kind of challenge you to is 50% coverage. So at least kind of 50% of the code should be covered by unit tests. And you can do more, you can do less, up to you. And also kind of depends how much code you created in your own applications. So if you've done a lot of features, obviously don't try to achieve maximum. And other part is aligning with coding conventions and add comments to your code. So this is something which kind of will get subjective, but for the sake of kind of following good practices and things that we would do in our projects, I have added a link to Microsoft's own guidelines for C# coding conventions. So try to go through them and try to apply them in the code that you've written yourself. If you followed kind of the templates, kind of labs that were provided, you should already be quite aligned with those guidelines anyway. But in any case, try to write comments for all the classes and all the methods, trying to explain to yourself or to any other person who would investigate your code what those methods do, what those classes are intended for. It's a good practice to have, even if you're working on your own projects. Well, I do know that once I left the project to sit for a couple of weeks or a month, well, months turns into half a year. Once you return, you'll be thankful to yourself that you wrote the comments. And if you've done these things and kind of still have time before the next session, then I would suggest that you start adding more features to your application, so that instead of just having the ability to list people and add people to that list, also duplicate the same thing for events, so that you can have a list of events, add new events, and for each of the events, you're able to explore a list of people who are added to that event. That will add complexity both to the front end and to the database layer. And of course, as usual, you should be able to run your code locally and test your application locally and store the code in your own source repository so you don't lose it. So that's the task. Now let me check if we have any questions or comments in the chat. or you can just unmute yourselves and ask the questions. Is the task for next week clear? And I take the silence as a yes. In any case, you know where the Discord is and you can ask the questions there. Anything else before we end then, or do any of you need help with some of the things that you've been trying out or building? So once we can kind of focus on that afterwards, once people start to disconnect.
I probably missed the part when the database table were cleared. Persons. It was cleared or not?
The database table. I think the script, we added to the script those specific lines that cleared that.
Yeah, I mean, like what I can do actually on my end, I can share the screen again, and I can show exactly
maybe I missed
how
that
we
part.
did that. No. Let me just share my screen so I can show it again. So if we're talking about the example that I showed today, that in scripts folder, we have the script post deployment, and this script will run after we deploy our database project to the database. And here, as you can see, the first statement is check if there are any records here. If yes, then delete them, and only after that, run the person's SQL script again. So each and every time it will clean the table and add all the records basically again.
Sorry, my question was processing. I'm surprised the test worked. It's added one. Why list all gets not 301 records but only one?
Because
okay.
of this.
Yeah. That's all. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. Awesome. Any more questions, guys?
Okay. I think with this, we'll then conclude today's session. If you come up with your questions, or if you kind of, when later trying, come up with some issues, come to Discord and ask questions. That kind of venue has been woefully underutilized so far. But yeah, thank you everyone who joined. Thank you for the wonderful presentation, Anton. And hope to see you also all next time. Thank you. Bye.
Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye.